together. And I noticed that we didn't do introductions on the last one, I think because we're just so used to all being on Zoom, but it's like all the commissioners, Ryan O'Connor and Ling Becker. So how's that for introductions? We're gonna do this workshop. It's gonna go pretty quick with the information because we have heard much of it before, but we'll be able to go a little deeper and then we'll get to questions. Ling has a great video. If you didn't get a chance to look ahead, there's a little video coming up on Tech Packs. And then really highlight our work. I think what's important, as you know, and Ling kind of has said this before, but we really relied on community to help us do our work really quickly. And so we've learned a lot, and that's what this evaluation is gonna result in. And I just want to give a special thank you to Dana DeMaster, who has done this work so well. I think when it comes to evaluation, I think Ramsey County is leading in this area, that we're actually taking into account what we did, what worked well, what didn't work well, so that we can design what we do with the next round of funding going forward based on real information. And so with that, I'll turn it over to County Manager Ryan O'Connor to take us to the next step.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And if we don't, hey, Sue, I think you're on there. If we don't get Larry to pop back on soon, we could bump Dana up from, she's watching right now, and she could become like just someone who jumps in if need be along the way. Ling and I have read the report. Ling's well aware of all the projects, and we absolutely can talk about it either way, but Larry's had a role in it, so we're hoping he'll be able to join us. I appreciate the opportunity just to set the stage. When we started our CARES spend, one of the principles that the board approved at the beginning was a robust evaluation as a part of all projects. There was the compliance and oversight function, the racial equity community engagement function, and the evaluation function. And as someone who comes out of an evaluation background, I think one of the biggest frustrations is when we talk about evaluation as something that like we don't always have resources for. I would say then do less and evaluate everything you do. Because simply trying hard without evaluating it, just, you don't know how you do. These evaluation workshops are going to be structured over the next number of weeks. There's 11 total evaluations. I put the link to the overall evaluation spot on our CARES website in the chat, just so you could easily access it if you wanted it. It breaks into chapters and there's a good executive summary. It shows the power of our evaluation team and the work that they have the ability to do. They want to continue to do more. It's a space where long-term, like I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to be resourced differently. Other counties have done like a 1 or 2 page quote unquote evaluation of their CARES spending and said like it went really well. And I'm not questioning whether it did or it didn't. I wouldn't call that a full-blown eval. And I think that what you see here is a lot more about trying to say this is what we know and this is what went well and this is what we would do differently now given an opportunity again. I also want to end on this point. There is, in any good evaluation, there should be a tension that exists between the evaluator and the program unit, because the evaluator doesn't like work lockstep with the program unit. That is here. And that was a part of the conversation, even as these came forward, is, we don't agree on every single point and every single spot about the way things get articulated, to which I say that's okay. The board wants to go through the evaluations and learn from them. And so just know that like quietly as we work through these, depending upon where you sit, there are spots where you exactly agree with one conclusion or another. I think what's more important is setting the table and painting the picture. So big kudos to Ling Becker, Joanna Berg, Larry, and Dana for letting us jump in today with workforce, and we'll go from there. Take it away, Ling.
Yeah, thanks, commissioners. Thanks, Ryan. I wanted to just give you a little background about what we did. We received $15 million, or 16% of that direct allocation of CARES Act funding as our budget. We ended up spending, I guess to the penny or to the dollar here, about $12 million, almost $13 million. Really because we did a reimbursement model. So a lot of this had to do with, what the community was able to kind of support at the time. And so we didn't quite hit our 15 million, but we did spend almost 13 million. We used a series of emergency purchase informal quotes, and we'll talk about that throughout the presentation, but these were much quicker ways of getting money out to community using an emergency purchase process. And as Commissioner Massac-Castillo mentioned, we really relied on the community. We were releasing these literally during the weekend of George Floyd's murder in the community. I mean, we paused slightly but after advice from our community members, they wanted us to keep going and ensure that these resources got out to the community. And we received, well over 125 applications with extremely creative and innovative ideas from our community. Just as a visual as to like some of the different programs that we did, we opened up career labs within our service centers and libraries. We were by far the only county in the state with in-person services as early as we were, probably as early as late July, we had some open. In August, we had some open. That was really critical because we were serving a lot of our Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities in person there under safe public health guidelines. We also provided a variety of student, young adults, youth support, and that's what's yellow here. I wanted to really demonstrate that we really focused on these populations of young impacted individuals. And we also did the Tech Pack project, what we'll talk about later, but we also had these community contracts, and that we had multiple buckets of those, but they serve different populations using different models of service delivery. Just to give you an example of the depth and breadth of the contracts that we did, these are just the community orgs that we work with around youth and young adults. We ultimately executed contracts with 89 organizations in Ramsey County. So we did not keep much of this money in-house. We gave it to the community to serve those that they are most closely connected with. So you will see the depth and breadth of these organizations. They range everywhere from well-established ones to smaller organizations that are newer into the workforce area in Ramsey County. But many of them had excellent programs with great outcomes. And we served almost, I believe, 2,400 young adults and youth and young adults during this time. Here's some pictures of things that they did. The top picture with these young gentlemen, they are part of JK Movement. They were going through a series of career exploration, resume writing, interviewing. On this day, they were dressed up, they had gotten haircuts, and they were all ready to do their mock interviewing. We also contracted with an organization called JL Griffey's that was doing automotive and aviation training. And then the Zoom call here is a group of young people in Ramsey County who were going through a program through Junior Achievement. I also want to talk about digital literacy and the digital divide in our community. We know that COVID has brought to light the significant need for additional technology and digital literacy for residents in order to even interview for jobs, in order to do jobs. Basically, the way that people have been able to work at home is through technology. And so we really built this model on what is called kind of this three-legged stool. Rather than just giving technology, we really felt that connectivity was really important. So people got a refurbished laptop, a hotspot, and then they also received every one of these tech packs that we created had a digital navigator assigned to it. So the person got one-on-one digital navigation training. And so I'm going to share a really quick video here. I have to go out and get this up for you, and hopefully you can hear it.
The Ramsey County Tech Pack Initiative was born from the pandemic to support economic inclusion by bringing computers, internet, and digital literacy training into the homes of Ramsey County residents.
My name is Tarina O'Connor. I have a family of 5 now. We currently reside here in Maplewood. Life before COVID was pretty busy for our family here. Myself was a member service director at the YMCA for 15 years. My husband, he is an industrial worker at Brothers. Children were at school. Life after COVID was completely different. Children were pretty much distance learning full time. So after being furloughed, pretty much taking on the teacher role ×2, it was a little bit stressful before, but I started with resources, just trying to find even a part-time job just to be able to still help my husband. So I started looking through the Dislocated Workers Program through the Minnesota Workforce Center. Looking on their website, they had the Tech Pack program.
There's many things about the Tech Pack program that we are very proud of. One is that we were able to provide a large number of computers and digital literacy packaged together for our residents who were COVID impacted.
Terina's Tech Pack was made possible by a community partnership that includes Ramsey County coordination and funding through the CARES Act. The computers were refurbished by Tech Dump, a local nonprofit and social enterprise committed to electronic recycling and job creation to people facing barriers to employment.
The other things that we're really proud of too is that we brought together a partnership of folks that hadn't really worked together before, and we anticipate an opportunity to leverage those partnerships as we go forward and continue toward an economic recovery.
Something that was inside of there, you had a pretty cool backpack to keep all your items in. You had a refurbed laptop with a charger. You had a cool pad, which is kind of like a free internet. And then they gave you a set of headphones, and you had additional resources in there.
Training for this technology also involves community partnerships, including Literacy Minnesota. Each Tech Pack is assigned a digital navigator who ensures each participant gets the basic skills needed to connect and use the computer. Then works with each participant to establish goals and provide the free training necessary to reach them.
Being able to actually have the Tech Pack and bring it into my home, like that kind of gave me some joy and a little bit of reassurance that I do have some resources. Being able to find a job, like that was my #1 priority. With that being on Indeed pretty much every day, being able to reconstruct my resume through Coursera, being able to do Zoom calls for interviews, like those were pretty huge for me. I was able to find a part-time job as a caregiver. Also with finding out I'm pregnant with our 4th child, being able to do doctor Zoom calls. That actually helped a lot here. Just being able to utilize the Tech Pack with that too as well. Being able to utilize it for my kids doing distance learning, that also helped. So it definitely came in handy for our family.
And then the last thing that I'm really proud of is just to be able to see some of the unintended benefits that bringing technology to families meant in this program. Our efforts were really around helping people get access to computers and technology and literacy so that they could be prepared for work. However, once people got that technology, they were able to use it for telehealth, to connect with their family, to lessen the burden of distance learning on their families. And so the combination of all those things really just show that, you know, we were focused on one goal, primarily around the workforce piece, but providing people with these Tech Packs ended up supporting families in a much broader way.
Tech Packs is part of Ramsey County Investment and Support Efforts RISE program. In its first year, the program distributed 2,150 Tech Packs utilizing CARES Act funding and community partnerships.
I am in the process of looking for a full-time job, but remote from home. So this will actually be able to help me work from home off of the Tech Pack. I think it was just a very awesome opportunity.
To learn more about the outcomes of the Tech Pack initiative, visit ramseycounty.us/techpacks.
All right, I wanted to just thank Communications for their help in helping us put that video together, and hopefully that did more than.
You want ship too?
I like how they deliver. They come through so quick.
It makes everything so much easier in quarantine. You know.
What are we ordering, Ling?
Guys,
Little YouTube commercial there.
my YouTube is still playing. I apologize.
There's
Okay.
Dana, and just so
All
everyone's
right.
aware, Dana's going to jump in on the evaluation piece when we get there and help walk us through it a little bit, and we'll pinch hit with her as needed. But Dana knows this stuff really well too. So finish your part though, Ling.
It is hard to turn this stuff off. Okay, I finally got it off. Sorry about that. All right, thank you, Dana, for joining us. I will let you know where Larry was supposed to kind of take over. We were kind of sharing the slide, but I'm happy to jump in as well. So really it was important for us to go back to what our goals were as we think about evaluation. We wanted to ensure access of in-person and virtual services to connect our residents to employment resources. We also wanted to close some of the tech gaps that our residents were experiencing. One of our goals was also to invest in community-based organizations, including those who have a strong focus in those communities who have been most impacted. And then lastly, we wanted to make sure that we were filling in gaps for our youth and young adults. And so Dana, I'll kind of turn it over to you if you want to talk about those evaluation questions that I think were standard across all the programs.
Sure. And so from these goals, we have 3 evaluation questions that determined what would be looking at for this project. And the first 2 are ones that when Ryan came to us and asked my team to take on this, the 2 major evaluation questions that he wanted answered across all projects were, are Ramsey County residents better off because of this CARES programming? And did the project achieve the outcomes the community was seeking? And so how responsive were we to community needs and desires? But then also for this particular project, we're working with so many different community organizations and vendors, many of whom who had not had a previous contract with the county. And so really, how can the county better attract, retain, and support community partners through contracting? And so what could we learn from their experience in that? So those are the 3 questions we were looking at. We received, how we evaluated it is we received monthly progress reports from all the community partners. So who they were serving, what their activities were, what kind of outcomes they were seeing. Demographic reports from those organizations on who they served. We did an electronic survey of 504, well, we received results back from 504 program participants. And this was across all the different programs, many of which were Tech Pack users or people who received the Tech Packs. We held 4 focus groups or listening sessions in December that 36 different community partners attended, really focused on their experience, whether they thought that the program goals were aligned with their organizations, and the kind of support they had received from the county during this time. And then finally, there was the cohort, the Community Inclusion and Innovation Fund. And so we worked together with the Center for Economic Inclusion on doing a separate focus group for that cohort. And so for all of these, we analyzed all the qualitative data plus the quantitative data. Some of the things we saw in terms of residents served, and there could be some overlap because each community vendor was reporting who they served, but people could have been served in multiple programs. So this is not unique. But 92% identified as Black, Indigenous, or otherwise people of color. A lot of young people, 84% were ages 16 to 34, and a slightly more females than males received the various different services. Go to the next slide. In terms of engagement and outreach, from the vendor reports, we found that about 8,000 residents were served through the various programs. The more than 2,000 residents received the Tech Packs, which is a pretty big number there. And there were 13,000 different services that were delivered. And so, within those agencies, they were offering different types of services. And the community career labs took reservations to serve nearly 1,300 additional people in addition to those who had the Tech Packs at home. 20% report that they found a job while receiving services. This isn't necessarily because of the services. This was not a causal evaluation to say that this particular service resulted in this, but we did find that 20% found employment while receiving or while in the program. Okay, so what we learned. So are Ramsey County residents better off because of this programming? So overall, we found that people felt that they were better off both through their self-report and the surveys, as well as through our various focus groups. And in my mind, we're also thinking about not only the people who receive the services, but the organizations we funded. Because many of those people who work for those organizations, otherwise manage or run those organizations, also are Ramsey County residents. And so these were important in terms of helping their businesses stay afloat and grow during this time as well. But most notably, the 2 groups experiencing the most severe job losses, when we look at Department of Economic, when we look at DEED data, who experienced the initial job loss at the greatest rate were young people, and then particularly young people who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And this was by far the largest group served by these programs. And so really in line with who was experiencing that economic loss. The majority of the people responding to the survey, well more than the majority, felt that the services matched their employment related needs. In addition, the reflective listening sessions with the community partners, they told us lots of stories about kind of a holistic approach and how many of these, some of the flexibility offered in the way that we did our contracts and in the way that work services were defined were a little bit more broad than the ways we've been able to do in the past. So many people talked about not only employment, but the impact on health, education, housing, and their overall well-being. And some of the quotes we have pulled out from the participant surveys, people talked a lot about the impact of the tech packs on their ability to help their children do schoolwork, their ability to access information on COVID itself, find testing sites, attend doctor's appointments. And so all of these different things that went beyond just employment. I think another benefit during this time was also the social interaction, and that people were able to attend church services online, or were able to keep up with friends and family during holidays and things, and the impact that they saw on their mental health. On the other hand, unmet needs do remain. About 35% of the survey respondents reported that they had unmet needs, and particularly around housing, food assistance, childcare, and transportation. In addition, other people reported that they had more education needs, and that while they were able to access some things because of the programming, they weren't able to necessarily complete programs or had further ongoing needs. And others still reported unmet technology needs. And so not everyone got a tech pack. And so there were people who responded to the survey who were saying too that even either with the tech pack or without it, they were having difficulty affording internet, accessing computers, that sort of thing. You can go on to the next. So
And
did the
Dana,
project,
hey,
yeah.
Dana, thank you, first of all, for stepping in and pinch hitting as though you practiced for the pinch hitting opportunity that came your way. And we'd love for you to stay with us. Larry's computer crash has ended, and we've been emailing on the side, so we got him bumped back up. So Larry, we continued forward. We started, you can see the slide run. If you've caught your breath and you'd like to join us, we'll let you jump in and be a part.
I would love to join you. My apologies, Chair, Commissioners. What just happened here is I can't explain it just yet. But yes, I'll carry forward. Thank you, Dana, for stepping in. So what we learned, did the projects achieve the outcomes the community was seeking? The Workforce Development CARES funding went to the community. It went to a number of community partners, as was expected from the community. Workforce Solutions launched career labs in addition to that at a time when career labs weren't open in most of the metro. And so we had a front door, an open door to the community for people to come in and search for jobs and get answers to questions that they had about the pandemic, and where resources were available to them. And also technology supports assisted in providing holistic approach to employment. And that really goes beyond just the tech packs, but really starting with the tech packs, getting that technology into the hands of community members so that they could interact with services and employers and education and the other things that people needed during 2020. So I'm not going to read all of the quotes directly, but we heard a number of things from community providers, partners. Many of them are outlined in the full report, but just to highlight the first quote, the goals were well aligned with the community needs and with what we wanted to do. Just as an overarching sense of what we heard from community partners, opening up the opportunities for partners to do what they wanted to do in the community, that they've been building on what they've been doing in the community, was a really big step forward. And we heard a lot of appreciation around that from the community. We can go to the next slide. So how can Ramsey County better attract and retain and support community partners? We heard a whole host of responses to this as well. most of it was really building on what was happening already. Workforce Solutions had been engaging the community for several months and even years around programming and what should be delivered in the community, what the needs are. And so community partners especially said that being engaged in that was helpful. Where they found challenges was around not having an opportunity up front to coordinate all of their activities. And so we brought a lot of community partners on all at one time or over a short amount of time. And there was some hope and future expectation that we'll be able to coordinate those activities better across all of these community partners. The ongoing contract management, we heard some around additional technical assistance, things that a small organization, especially some of the organizations, only had a handful or less people that were delivering the services. And so they hadn't been as mature as far as their accounting or their ability to interact with all the expectations that the county would have. For the CARES funding, we didn't have as many expectations as we do in most of our grants, but there was still an expectation or a hope that we would have more resources available to be able to assist community partners. And then to take a stronger leadership role in gathering partners. Where the county sits, we have an opportunity to be able to bring together community partners to have them engage with each other on the services that are being provided. And so we heard a lot about just opportunities to be able to engage the community in ways that's broader than just the community engaging around community or county activities, but also around those things that the community is already doing or things they'd like to be doing, and have them have opportunities to engage with each other. So really getting at a more of a leadership role for the county in facilitating those conversations. And again, I won't read through all of the slides, but we heard an awful lot from our community partners. And the third quote here, it's the first time we're working with Ramsey County and it turned out really well. And they made it simple enough for us to be successful. So it worked out really well. And I highlight that one because a number of the community partners that Workforce Solutions engaged with were new relative to working with the county or working as a partner with the county through funding that came through the county. And we heard a lot from our community partners around how that process went smoothly for them, mostly smoothly. We also heard some things we can improve on. But there were supports in place that helped community partners to do what they wanted to do. And there wasn't a heavy hand in redirecting to do something that the county was imposing. This was coming from community and really building on the efforts that are happening right now as we sit in our community. So with the recommendations, we broke recommendations for all of the CARES funded programs or projects into short and long term. And there's overlap with the short and long term. There's also some grouping that we can do. So if you look to the full report, you'll see a number of additional recommendations or more detail around them. But the first group in the short term is really what I was getting at, and Lang has brought up, and I'm sure Dana touched on it too. It's that coordination that can happen when we facilitate conversations across programs and community partners. And then that emphasis on having, it doesn't necessarily have to be a landmark launch to a project, but we were hearing more effort put into coordinating that activity as we're launching so that community partners know what others are doing. There's a real interest in being able to refer amongst each other and to have that knowledge base about what's happening in addition to what they're doing. Develop cohorts that include technical assistance and simplify reporting. We heard this across other areas too. So you'll hear this as other program areas around CARES come forward. This is really getting at, we had some success with cohorts where some of the community partners were looking for some additional work would be for us to facilitate more technical assistance. And then as you look to the long term to the right of that technical assistance, it's the ask or the potential that the county would have a resource available to community partners that would help to build capacity. So to go beyond our normal business of working with the partners that we're contracted with, but to also take some role in building up community partners so that they're available to the county more broadly when projects are being developed and things are available for them. The simplified reporting, most of that was on less frequency. We had each month we had reporting come through and we were asking for more things because there was a lot happening and there are a number of moving parts. And especially some of the smaller providers, that can overwhelm pretty quickly when you have not many people to be able to respond to something. It wasn't considered overwhelming in terms of the capacity or the amount that we were asking for. It was just the frequency with which we were asking was the primary thing we were hearing, that we could get the information we were asking for with less frequent reporting. And so that liaison technical assistant components, that would be more outreach around those things, so that we would play an active role in developing that information too as it comes in. And then more holistic family focused approaches. This really is what the community did with the resources. And so it's really saying to build on activities that are broader, initiatives that are broader than just an individual, so that we're working with an entire family or an entire community more broadly than just some of our program specific activities that we have now that are more centered on an individual. And another thing that we heard, and you'll hear this too, housing stability. We heard this come up a number of different ways. We heard it from the survey, from program participants, from community partners, that housing stability is a significant issue in our community, and it really precludes success in some ways around education and employment. And so we can't lose sight of that. And so it works its way in as a recommendation for workforce development, and you'll see it in other places too. And in addition to that, tech equity. The tech packs ultimately delivered on 2,150, I think was the total so far in tech packs delivered to the community. And that's just scratching the surface. We have zip codes with about 30% lacking either a device or appropriate internet in their house to be able to interact. And this truly was a tech pandemic in so many ways. People got isolated, even in neighborhoods where technology was really the thing that was uplifting. And we heard that repeatedly, especially from the survey that we did of people engaging in these services. So those that received tech packs were overly thankful, almost to a person, and the recognition that there's just so much more need. And then the last short-term recommendation, this type of communication, not to lose sight of, we've really developed a way to communicate in addition to in-person that can reach so many people. And it was interesting going into the listening sessions or reflection sessions with our program partners. Many of them wouldn't have been able to make an in-person meeting, but they're able to jump online and interact, give great feedback, and have great conversations across programs. And then they're able to do the next thing they need to do without having to drive to another location. And so this is recognition that we heard this repeatedly, that even though this isn't the best way, as I could use myself as an example this morning, when everything shut down and there wasn't really anything I could do except wait for it to come back. And that happens, but I had the technology and I'm back. Not everyone has that access, but where they do, this type of communication can really be effective. And we know that we can reach more people with it too, as we get creative in different ways that we do things. So.
Hey, Larry, before we go into the discussions and chance to just talk about the program, other learnings and pieces, and from the evaluation perspective or Director Becker's perspective, I just want to add one other piece too. One of the pieces that the board has in the past challenged me on as I read these, right? Our recommendations are often focused on what we need to do as a county system internally, short and long term. And I think that's important that that's a majority of where our focus lies, because that's where our sphere of influence is often at its greatest. When I think about some of the comments I see through Ling and email, Commissioner McDonough mentioned it during his commissioner update this morning, I believe it was, or at some point the deed piece, it was a legislative update, excuse me. I think about there's another level on recommendations for our policymakers, department head to also think about, which is like the dislocated worker program. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it wouldn't get the same responses on some of the ways that some of these things did. And how do we take lessons learned through this work here and apply them on a statewide lens? And what are those platforms? We didn't prep this. This is a reaction I had when I read this stuff through a different lens than others. I just wanted to frame that for the board as you enter in the discussion. Is I think there is one other layer to much of our question of how do we expand the work beyond our walls, because the resource need is great, but there's also a lot of resources that just seem to not land as well as maybe we wish they would.
Thank you, Ryan. So we have time now to go to commissioner questions. And Ryan, actually, that I wrote a note like, how does this apply as we build out our legislative agenda forward? So thank you for addressing it, because I think, as government, we're so good at putting layers, right? Because we don't want anyone to get away with anything that we don't think they earn. So we add all these layers, but then we hear like the reporting requirements become so burdensome. Is it worth it? So Commissioner McDonough, I'll start with you, and then Commissioner Carter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Couple comments, and then so I really appreciate Ryan, you reaching out to Dana right away and looking for this evaluation component, because I really think it's important. And I don't remember the exact words you used when you framed this up, but it was kind of like, if you're not evaluating it, don't do it, or something along those lines. So in some ways, evaluations can serve many purposes, right? One, it can validate your original goals. Yes, we achieved those goals, and you want to use that as part of the tool. You want to make sure you stay focused and you're on track. But I think moving forward, some of the biggest opportunity we have is about decision making going forward, right? What did we learn? Blaine and her team are really professional. They really get it, but we don't always have the answers, and we can't predict human nature, right? And we have to learn from that. And there's a couple of pieces here that, Ryan, you called out one, and Trista, you called out one, kind of the broader piece of all the other resources, but internally. And for me, it's like, and I don't know the answer to this, but one of the pieces moving forward, and why this information I think is so valuable, is unmet needs came up, I think, in 2 slides, and then in the recommendations that identified a more holistic approach, focusing in on the broader family. And it makes me wonder, and I get it, we want to touch as many people as possible, but to your lead in, Ryan, maybe we're better off focusing and meeting more unmet needs, or focusing in on the whole family. Means we touch less people, but maybe we provide stronger stability for that individual and that family, that eventually we can actually have a bigger impact in the community. Because if we're touching a bunch of people, but with not enough to really kind of get them going, once we're done touching them, does everything go back to the way it was for that individual or that family? And so I think that's really an important piece about the decision making. And that's always a quandary we wrestle with, right? Do more or go deeper. And, the evaluation piece, I think, can really help us. And then, one of the things, that I got to hear from you, and, other commissioners may have reported out at county boards, but, you were really good about, utilizing our libraries and getting out into the community. But towards the end, you are actually co-locating in community, in their buildings with them, and you are actually seeing a stronger response, I think. And I don't know if that was a part of the evaluation, but we tend to think, okay, let's get in the community. So we got tunnel vision. We look at our resources, our libraries, our park building, what we own, where we have access, so we can control it. We don't charge ourselves fees. But in the end, is that only really a baby step or half a step in really connecting with community? And do we got to go deeper and actually this co-locating, go right where that community is, and build on that that level of earned trust that community organization has already had? Yeah, it's safer to go in our library than it is to go into 160 Kellogg, but is it even more safer to go into HAP or go into the American Family Service Center, or neighborhood house? You can name them off. And how does that fit into this, again, the decision making as we move forward about where and how we're touching and providing services?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Madam Chair, if I may, I'm gonna just quick respond to that. Commissioner McDonough, I think one really great example is what we did with American Indian Family Center. It really is around making continuous improvements and listening to the community. The Tech Packs was a good model for some people. For the American Indian community, filling out a lottery and showing up at at the library probably was not the best model. So instead, we deployed tech packs directly through them, where they picked them up at the American Indian Family Center, and the digital navigation was actually provided by somebody at the American Indian Family Center, right? So we were willing, out of those 2,200 that we did, there was, we kind of laughed about it because it was sort of like the original Coke, and then we had like a lot of different other models, and eventually we started to lose a little bit of like, what was that original model? But that original model was core. That was what was demonstrated in the video. But we wanted to be able to listen to the community and say, you know, that model has a lot of the right pieces, but we need it this way. We need this added to it. We needed this taken away from it, right? So that was a really tangible example of that. But I do think around all of service delivery and the way we're doing the services, I think what Larry got to is, and we didn't maybe highlight it as well in the report back to you all, is those informal requests for quotes. They were completely an open RFP, like in the sense I asked like 4 questions. What do you need right now to support? Who would you be supporting and how would you do it? And we found a way to fund the vast majority of them, and to great success. I mean, I'm not worried at all about any sort of, did people do what they were supposed to do? We've met with, I mean, I literally have had meetings with every one of the leaders of those 89 organizations, and I trust in the work that they've done. And I think we've built a ton of great relationships that we can build on going forward. So our ecosystem is stronger because of it. Unrelated was sort of this resiliency fund. I know it wasn't in the evaluation because it was kind of an extra project that was happening, but we also lifted up the ecosystem that way as well. Just really saying, we need you here in 2021, 2022. And if there was a way for us to fill a gap, kind of like what we did with the small business relief, we did that for many workforce nonprofits as well.
Commissioner McDonough, did you have a follow-up?
I had one other follow-up, and I just wanted to maybe validate and recognize how important it was. Larry, I really appreciate you using the word mature when you were talking about organizations that just maybe didn't have the capacity to deal with our technical requirements and our reporting requirements. And Tristan, I think you touched on it in your comments there that, you know, that stuff builds over time, right? We have one problem, so then we create this, you know, rule that goes to everybody. We'll do that 10 times over, and we just left behind, you know, 30 groups that can no longer participate because they just can't do it. So, you know, I think having the ability to support them with technical assistance is going to be really important, but I also think we need to start taking a look at our rulemaking, our processes, and yeah, we're always going to have problems. Someone's always going to screw up somewhere. And when is it appropriate to just deal with that screw up versus that's a gap or a weakness in the system, and we've got to change the whole system because it's easier to do than just dealing with that one individual problem at that point in time. So I think it's a balance of providing that support, but then how do we make sure we just don't keep piling on either?
Mm-hmm. And Commissioner, I think the one thing I want to call out here too is that the decision-making is really important, right? Like when they ran into a problem, I made sure that either I or the next person who was a decision maker, we were meeting with them to be able to solve that problem immediately. And part of the urgency of the CARES dollars sort of forced our hand in that. We couldn't let things wait a week, another week. I had standing times on my calendar that basically any of the planners could put me in a meeting and we could make a decision to solve a problem for a vendor immediately. Those are things that don't really exist in our normal kind of way, of where the contract manager might email them 6 times and then eventually somebody says, oh, maybe we should elevate that. No, we needed to sort of have everything on a fast track. And I think that's the other piece that kind of goes along with technical assistance is just decision making, being able to give organizations an answer so they can know what they need to do next. So sorry.
That's all right. Thanks, Ling. Commissioner Carter, then McGuire and Reinhardt. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you so much. There's so much already proceeding in terms of the richnesses that come out of this evaluation, not only understanding whether we did what we intended to do and whether anybody was better off, but also the information for the future. And that is so important. I just wanted to lean into the fact that coming out, well, first of all, does Larry qualify for a tech pack? I want to remember to just have you all evaluate that later. Thank you to Dana and Larry and to you, Ling. But I also wanted to ask, and this is partially what Commissioner McDonough has been talking about already. As we figure out whether it's better if you will, to touch a lot of folks or to walk alongside, with those folks and families. And in this case, in terms of the relationships, the new relationships you've built with community organizations, how are we assessing this work as it applies not only to workforce solutions in your ongoing work, but as it applies to the comprehensive engagement of services across the community? And I know you can't necessarily answer that alone as I'm looking at you, Ling, but the considerations for work that is in process, with some of our partners right now that engages a thought about family stabilization, so that, do we touch a lot? Do we go deeper? But also, what have you explored or been able to find out about our ability to even touch more in using partners such as those that you've engaged here? And can you, or Ryan, on this response as well, can you share shadows for the future as to what that might mean as we think about the work we're doing with youth, with the ARP funds and funds comprehensively in the future, and potentially what that may mean in terms of how we conduct our youth and adult services? I'm sorry for the long and winding question, but there is just so much here that I have to ask it, and particularly as we are engaging to think about how we strategically plan and work with our ARP funds, and how this opportunity, unfortunately, that we've received during CARES, or fortunately that we have during CARES and ARP, can help us build the future. So I'm going to stop asking this long winding question and see what your thoughts may be.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Carter, thanks for the question. It's probably on everybody's mind. So there's a couple ways I might answer it. One, I don't view it as only CARES and ARP, and I know you don't either. I think it's actually, we should stop looking at the color of the revenue stream and talk about how we're trying to do the work, I think.
Absolutely.
And I'm seeing head nods, so I'm glad we all agree on that. Otherwise, we should have a different workshop. What I would actually say, there's this interesting part about bringing these evaluations in, because the cleanest way to maybe do it with the least questions and the clearest, spot is you wait till a budget presentation with the board on certain things that comes forward that's going to try and integrate some of this. Then you use this as the rationalization for why you did certain things. We're actually trying to engage more in the process as we go on the learning side. And so the one downside today that I want to try and avoid is not every area is on today because they didn't need to be here because we're doing the evaluation distinct to here. And I want to respect that a little. Here's what I would say though. Tina Curry's been involved with the EAC, the Equity Action Circle, and they've been bringing up family coaches. It's like their biggest recommendation of 120 that they brought up. I don't know how if you've read now this report evaluation and you've listened to that evaluation and you've thought about 3 other things, how you don't draw certain conclusions about maybe where we need to try and invest to see work start to feel and look different. And I can tell you that's part of what's coming together and will come before the board as we move through this year. I can tell you that the deputy county manager in that area and the department head are trying to say, how do you take some of these inklings and move? And Ling is a part of that work, right? It's not just in health and wellness. And then the last thing I'll say that just keeps coming up is it's like jobs to careers, housing to allow you to live where you want to live, and the education provided to your family. I feel like every week, no matter what the topic is, we're talking about it. And as we think about ARP and recovering from the pandemic, that is truly becoming that tier 3, 4, 5 conversation again and again. I hope that sort of answers it now, and more to come through the budget process very soon.
Yeah, I appreciate your even being willing to create a span of thinking or share that span of thinking. And I do look forward to that ongoing conversation that we are going to have and have the opportunity to entertain during our budget process as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. And I saw Dana had popped on and it sounded like she maybe had something to add to that. So Dana, if you wanted to add to that, I want to give you the opportunity.
Yes. This is the workforce development workshop, but we asked very similar questions and did in-depth analysis across all these different projects. And there were some things that just really stood out as you looked at the data, not just in its own program silo, but really looked at it crosswise. and we'll get into some of those more later, but those messages, regardless of whether we're asking food vendors or the research trusted messenger vendors, whether we're talking to families who received learning vouchers, it didn't matter, you know, people experiencing homelessness in our interviews with them, certain things came loud and clear through all of it. And like what Ryan was saying about that, you know, the jobs to careers to housing, those foods and basic needs, and how do we look at a family as a holistically and not within our own silos and funding streams. And so that I just wanted to add that really, when we were looking at the data across all those spaces, that was some of the more powerful things we found, was the consistency of that message.
Wow.
Thank you, Dana.
And I
Commissioner
just wanted to add, just briefly, thank you, Chair, that is so powerful, you know, not just understanding what the results were, whether anybody's better off, but really to guide us toward how our model can change and what we need to do to be better equipped to work in different and perhaps more effective ways. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is all such great work, and I appreciate what we've been talking about, because my questions or my comments were along similar lines. But just to first of all say thank you so much, Ling, Dana, Larry, everyone involved in this work. Oh my gosh, this is just such amazing work that you're doing it holistically, that you are trying to get away from the silos. I think that's sort of a lot of our question, is how are we thinking of it in the big picture? And you've already said that's what we need to be doing, and that's what the community partners want, is to be looking holistically at this. Ling, I love that you keep time on your calendar so you can address people's questions immediately. Those are just such brilliant things to be doing. Thank you for that. I just a question to sort of highlight the kinds of things that I, hope that we can get out of this. Just an example, in our community, Nicole and I are both involved with the Suburban Ramsey Emergency Coalition, and they're a group of people, out in our Suburban Ramsey, and they just want to help. So every week, Nicole and I are asked to give an update, sort of what's going on at the county, how can they maybe help, where are the needs in our community, and I think we're just getting so much better at identifying them and maybe identifying partners that we can recommend, because they don't want to give money to us, but they want us to give them who in our community is doing this work, who in our community needs this work. I know you as a county are trying to do this, but how can we help? How can we help fill this gap? And I'll just say that sometimes it's been a challenge for me to give them that information. We tell them what we're all doing, but anyway, it's just I'm imagining that this work that we're hearing about today, that the work that you're doing, Ling, identifying these community partners, that's all going to really help us help our communities do work that they want to do, in these different organizations that want to help. So that's just a long affirmation of what you're doing, and how, when we say, okay, what do we need, who needs what, and how can we refer people to these organizations that also want to help. So thanks for that. And just thanks for your work on the Suburban Family Collaborative too. I know you're very involved in that, so that's been great.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Madam Chair, I'll just say that we are trying to leverage our Ramsey County Means Business website. So by the end of the month, we are going to have 120 workforce partners all listed on there. In addition, we're building out now the career pathways for all the school districts on that website. So businesses are going to be able to have one-stop shopping to figure out like this whole ecosystem, as complex as it is. And so we're really kind of leaning into some of the tools that we already have, but I'll give you a little preview of some of the things, as you mentioned, this coalition. I mean, we are going to need a lot more work experiences as we move in toward a recovery. I think that's a thing that the business community is really going to see us lean in on, and also a mentor for everybody that wants one, right? I mean, we really know, especially for Opportunity Youth, there is nothing better than a supportive adult. And I've had so many conversations about mentoring in the last couple of weeks. I think, as just a preview, I think, I can safely say we will be rolling out some sort of mentorship program that will be quite robust as we move toward a recovery to supporting young people, through some partners. So these are really, big parts of the puzzle that we need, that community has to step forth. The county can't do everything. There's opportunities where we lead, we fund, we elevate, we uplift, but we need everybody, especially as we move into a post-COVID recovery. And if we really want it to be an inclusive one, we will need a lot of community partners. And we need to do our homework too on breaking down silos within our own work. And I just wanted to reassure Commissioner Carter, we're not necessarily waiting for a time to do that. I feel like we're doing that quite a bit now. I mean, you'll hear about that more in my budget presentation, but certainly my role as Workforce Solutions, being a strategic partner to many of the county departments, whether it's social services, whether it's public health, public pathways, whether it's transforming systems together, serving on the continuum of care. You know, we see workforce as an absolutely holistic part of everything that the county does. And so, so that's embedded in everything that we are working on today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Ling. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. As this discussion has been going on, it's been, can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
We can.
It's kind of muffled on my end here. Anyhow, as long as you can hear me. The one thing that I think has really come out or stood out to me is the whole fact that we have taken an approach, and why we're a model, I think, is because we recognize that one size doesn't fit all. And so, because when you talk about, you know, putting a little bit of money into a program and then divvying it up, you don't get the results that you want. And so, but that's not what we did. I mean, we looked at it and said, okay, we have to identify the needs. We have to fit the services to those needs, and invest our money accordingly. And that's what we've done. And with Dana's comments, it's clear that we've done that not only in Workforce Solutions, but with the rest of the CARES funds as well. So again, no wonder we're a model, because that's what you need to do. It may be one program like TechPack, but it's how it's administered, how we get what is needed out to certain folks in different ways, and what the accountability and transparency standards are for that. So I think that we are doing this correctly. Can we fine tune it? Of course. There's always room for improvement in anything. But the fact that we were able to put this together in the first place is really a tribute to our staff and moving things forward. With the partners that we're talking about, and the question that I have is, I remember, for example, I think it was the White Bear Rotary had gathered some funds, and they were trying to get them out to folks that had specific needs in the community. But they realized pretty quickly that they didn't know how to identify them. And so with the partners, is there a way that, for example, these community organizations, businesses, and their role is very clear, I think. They want skilled workers, and people want to find jobs. And so trying to make those connections with business partners is really critical. For the nonprofits that are out there, I know sometimes when we have fundraisers, we say for different things, it's like, okay, you want to fund a book for 6 kids. This is the amount that you give. And we try to fit things for the needs that are out there. I'm wondering if there is some way that we can encourage or to provide opportunities, I guess, for the nonprofits that are out there to fill some of that need, to say, okay, if you want to figure out, fund a need in the community, contact us and we'll hook you up with somebody and what the needs are. And I wasn't quite sure that that was what was included in those partners, if the nonprofits are really there. But I think that I can see where organizations would take something on and say, okay, I want to be able to fund this number of, and I said books before, and that's fine, books or tech packs or whatever, in my community. And going out and fundraising and then coming back and saying, okay, here are the funds to do this. So what do you think of that? And I think that you have done some of that, but maybe not to the extent that we probably could. So what are your thoughts on that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, yeah, I did do a full round of a lot of Rotary meetings recently, just to do some fundraising for tech packs in general and for donations for computers. I think if you recall, you know, the presentation from Public Health around potentially like future recycling facilities and adding technology as a part of that, like there's opportunity, right? Where people could donate things and the county could reuse them in very positive ways. So I just want to make sure we're thinking holistically about all the ways the county kind of touches different aspects of work that of things that our residents need, right? And maybe we can be a conduit for some of that. I know before Zach retired, I did talk to him a little bit about some of those kind of more creative ideas, but certainly, you know, I would always encourage people to support PCs for People and Tech Dump in our community and the work that they're doing around technology. If that's, you know, somebody needed a cause right now, for sure, you know, so.
Thanks, Ling. Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chairman Castillo. And I don't know that I have a question so much. It's just thank you. This is fascinating and powerful work that's been done. And I know how hard you work, Ling, and everyone in Workforce Solutions. I guess the question from this conversation that's really bubbling up for me, in terms of our residents first work, we've talked about shifting the bureaucracy back on ourselves. I know we've talked about, you know, what needs to be done with that bureaucracy. How do we simplify those programs so we're not jumping through so many hoops, which would allow for more customization and flexibility to actually meet people's needs? How do we get better tools and technology to implement those programs? But really, I think the purpose of all that is about the relationship time that's created when you do that. And you hear that when in folks asking for mentorship opportunities, in the partners asking for opportunities to have relationships with the other partners in the community and in a cohort model for something like that. And with our, you know, beyond just the person getting services and the person providing services, that's obviously an important relationship, but the whole web of relationships there, whether it is people receiving services. And I think we've seen that demonstrated in our youth convenings and conversations, that it's not just the relationship between the organization supporting the youth, but the youth with each other. It seems like there are relationships there, and those are opportunities for them. So thinking about how do we see that full web of connections and focus on that piece of how we don't want to connect with one another to fill out another form or to get another piece of documentation. We want to connect with each other to form relationships. So how do we get rid of the pieces we don't want, so we make more time for the relationships that actually bring that support and fulfillment and that sense of community that may be lacking? So, yeah.
I went backwards there and muted myself. So I don't see any other hands, but I do have a couple questions and comments. First, you said, I want to go back to the very beginning. You said you work with 89 contractors, which if we just take a moment and pause and celebrate that for a minute, because we have over the years, I've heard over and over and over how difficult it is for procurement and access, and to be able to say you did it, I hope that we're gleaning the lessons and the success of working in community with 89 contractors across the organization in every category, because clearly the pandemic allowed us to fast track and work with community in a new way. And I hope we continue that moving forward and we don't go back to the long process that keep people out in the future, because I think we should just take a moment and celebrate, and I'll let you respond, Ling, on that.
Yeah, Commissioner, that certainly wasn't just our doing alone. You know, we obviously had a lot of support in the county between the county attorney's office, the compliance team, the procurement team, you know. But I do think, you know, some of the unique things that, you know, we did right away is, you know, we brought together the whole procurement team to meet with our planning team, and I showed them the data. I talked to them about what workforce services are. You know, for the first time, I mean, I know we kind of have a procurement person assigned to us as a department, but I wanted to start with a level setting where you know, like understand our work, understand who's being impacted, understanding the difference that you make. And it kind of became a normal process for me, probably every few weeks, to send out a video or a note or pass along something to all those back office people to see the impacts that they were doing, right? They got to see some of the quotes, they got to see some of the pictures. And I think, you know, from what I heard from Dana and her team, like that really made a difference. You know, I think sometimes it feels like we push paper, but we're actually impacting people. And there was a sense of urgency in this county that, I mean, I'm fairly new, but I'm guessing it's a brand new concept, how quickly we move some things here without using some of our systems. So just so you guys know, you know, we went around a lot of our automated procurement systems. We did a lot of emailing to approve contracts. I mean, this was a lot of work for people to track all this stuff and figure it out. And I want to thank Joanna and Ryan for, you know, helping just really make it a priority that we had to get these dollars out. And as I said at the beginning, you know, we were given the 15 million and we spent almost 13. And really that was money that the community lent us and we had to pay it back because they did it was a reimbursement model. They had to do the work first. And I think the community should be really proud that they not only put out proposals, they turned things around, they provided the backup that we needed. We were happy to, you know, kind of, you know, give them the money as they were churning in those reimbursements. But this was just as much them as it was the county. I mean, this was the workforce system of Ramsey County at work, and we will need that turning at its highest and best potential into next year and into probably the next 2, 3, 4 years if we're gonna, you know, really change outcomes for people in our community. So,
and if I could just add, Madam Chair, 2 things to that, because I think it's important from the systems building side. That was not a sustainable model as we built it to get through that push. And so the one part that gets left out is I would bet some of Ling's darkest moments came trying to push that many contracts out with everybody else, or at least those are the ones that I got to talk to her about the most. And you know, and that's not to downplay how important this was. What it really is though is we built a back office team that didn't exist. We marshaled resources, and then all the behavior steps Ling talked about also matter, like resources but not aligned don't matter. And this thing happened then that was there. Now, Tara Bach has moved into a new role over in finance under Alex that is all about continuing this function forward. We had a conversation between the first workshop and the second with the city and the county, the city of St. Paul and the school district in St. Paul about, are we able to share back office resources because we have more infrastructure in this space than they do? Is there opportunity to not have 3 organizations with $600 million build up their own infrastructures? That was a part of our dialogue. There's a lot of openness. I do think we're going to have to think about some sustainability on the end of the infrastructure requirement, and it's not sexy stuff, but you can see the benefit. So I really appreciate you calling it out.
Yeah, the highlighted piece that was exciting to me is, you know, I would suspect many of these organizations are nonprofits, right? And so really this was our opportunity to help them sustain when they're, you know, their income, their revenue streams were considerably down during the pandemic, that we keep them employed and we kept them because we know our nonprofit community is so pivotal to our success in Ramsey County. And so to me, that's really exciting. It's in the details, right, as where the success lies. And so I really appreciate that. The other question I have, and this has been on my mind for quite a long time, and I know I've raised it with Ryan before, but you know, when we talk about technology and the technology gap at our Association of Minnesota Counties and NACO, we talk broadband, but we do it in the context of the rural community for equity. But we have a broadband problem in our urban core. And we have a huge tech gap in our urban core. I mean, all of us at some time have experienced it ourselves, let alone families that can't afford it. And that utility that at one time, you know, it's a for-profit company, right? That it gets your cable and your internet, but it really has become a lifeline utility. And so I hope that we don't just put that in the short-term solution category, but that we put it in the long term, and that we consider about how we both advocate on the state and federal level, but even how we think about investing moving forward, because we have to close that gap with or without those for-profit companies for our community. So I just wanted to put that plug in, because I think just like housing and food, you know, if we're talking about the whole picture, is how do we create, as we're building out affordable housing or building out new developments potentially, as we talked about in our morning workshop, how do we make sure that broadband is a part of that package? and our, as our infrastructure moving forward. So Ryan, I'll let you respond.
Thanks, Madam Chair. You and tech equity is actually one of the focuses of the broader incident management team work, and you're going to hear more about that as we go forward. And tech equity, one part of tech equity would be talking about tech packs, but it is not holistic. So well said. As we look forward, you asked a question this morning about the role of the business community, and I'm actually going to go back to that question now and say, let's answer it now, which is, part of the business community's argument around why they choose to invest in areas is based on scale. And I cannot for the life of me understand then when I do the math, how scale doesn't work in the areas in Ramsey County that you referenced, seeing as how we're the most urbanized county in the state of Minnesota, which means it ain't about scale.
Right.
It's about other underlying assumptions or economic of things, right? And at some point, I think when we ask questions around where we need the private sector to be a part of investing, it's that the economies of scale need to show up. Now, does the public sector potentially have a partnership role in ensuring that households then have the ability to connect? I think there's like a lot of important conversation to continue to have there that leads into some of what you heard. But the idea that like in an urban setting in one of the most urbanized areas, we should have to we should have to put in the loop just seems so antithetical to the general approach to how private business has laid broadband. I just want to call that out.
Right. Well, and I think there's an opportunity that we partner, I'm thinking about coming up, and I'm glad Joanna is, the conduit here between all of these areas with EGCI, no pun intended, or pun, it worked out anyway, is like as we're redesigning Rice Street through the north end, which is an area of a huge gap in need, which I'm sure Lynn can attest to around tech equity, is do we bring in those partners, whether the for-profit companies, or we demand that fiber optic cable get laid during the rebuild process, which will grow out into our communities, especially in an area of concentrated poverty, racial dynamics, right, in the north end. And so thinking about how we do that in this work moving forward, I think is really important as well. Commissioner Reinhardt, I see your hand up.
And I just have to comment because I remember a number of years ago when we tried to make the argument that we needed to, with the city of St. Paul, build that out to make sure that that infrastructure was available. And then the city of St. Paul backed out. There was a lot of pressure that came from the industry. But the answer that they gave us at that point was that it wasn't necessary because they could handle it all and they would do it all. And so I know other commissioners were part of that discussion. And it's really, we maybe should dig up some of that stuff and remind them of the fact that they said we didn't need to do this, but that they were going to make sure that everyone was covered.
Yeah.
And I was surprised, quite frankly, that earlier, and I think it was right before the workshop, maybe the discussion about the fact that the North End didn't have broadband. I did not realize that, and so I think it's important, as you stated, that we need to really look at this in a more holistic manner and put the industry, hold their feet to the fire a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because they claim that they can do it all. Okay. As far as the infrastructure.
Right.
What we do, and I think you stated that very well also, is, okay, if the infrastructure is there, how can residents take advantage of that? But without the infrastructure there, there's nothing that we can do.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. I'll turn it back over to Ling or Joanna. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts as we close up our workshop today.
Commissioners, if I could, I just want to say thank you so much. And I want to just take a minute here to acknowledge Ling and Larry and their amazing team in Workforce Solutions. I want to give my thanks to Dana DeMaster and also Dana Nafke and Tara Bach. We talked a little about all of the work that was done by the folks in the back office, and it is a huge lift, and they just stepped up and did amazing work. This is something I'm proud of every day. When I'm not exhausted by it, I'm extremely proud of it. And I just want to end by thanking Ling and her team. And with that, I'll turn over to you, Ling, for anything else you'd like to say.
I'll just close since I get a last word here. I'll just tie in with that tech equity piece. I mean, the future of work is changing. I would say that my role now is to make sure that everyone can engage in it, and the jobs of today that have kind of pivoted due to the pandemic, you will hear in our budget presentation as well. Like, we are looking toward the future, and the jobs are not what they are going to be, and people need investments in training. And the idea of you can just work a retail job and that's still going to be around, it's going to look a lot different. You're going to need to have a lot of digital literacy to be able to have a job in the future. So we're trying to position ourselves for that. So yeah, thank you so much. And I know I want to say again, thank you to the community here. This is not a evaluation about just Workforce Solutions. It really is. The community has done an amazing job of uplifting the work here this last year. So thank you, Commissioner and Madam Chair.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. And thanks, Ling, for your work.
Good work.
Good work, everyone. Good job, Trista.